Hi, Govind.
Hello, hello Nemani. S- Uh,
I can't hear. She's muted now.
am I muted? Oh yes.
Yeah,
Okay.
would you like to try presenting your
Yes, I will
slide?
do that. 1 second. Yeah. S-
Yeah, looks good.
Okay, great.
I think we are set. Just wait for 2 3 minutes.
Sure, sure.
It is 1:30 and 16 which are there.
Morning, let's wait a few minutes.
Yeah,
Couple of minutes.
we can start. Yeah.
No,
Okay.
couple of minutes.
Oh, wait for.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay, so let's get started. So we're very happy to start with Govind today. He's going to tell us about chaos and periodicity in the three rotor problem.
So thank
Whenever you
Sure. So thank you, Nemani, Sujay, and the rest of the team for this very kind invitation. I'm particularly grateful as my talk is somewhat outside the main theme of the conference. So I hope to entertain you while you have your lunch on some work I've been doing with the Himalaya Senapati at CMI. So this is based on these two papers published in the journal Chaos. Um, and let me get started. So the three rotor problem is what I'll be talking about. In the three rotor problem, three equally massive point particles or rotors move on a circle without collisions and interact via attractive cosine potentials. So let me play a movie of this so you get an idea. We have three equally massive point particles moving on a circle. They can pass through each other and they interact via the cosine of the difference in angle, that is the force. Uh, so if the angular positions of the three rotors are denoted theta 1, theta 2, and theta 3, the configuration space is a product of three circles, the three torus. And the Lagrangian is simply sum of kinetic energies half m r squared theta I dot squared minus potential energy given by coupling constant g times the cosine of the difference in angles. Now, where does this model come from? It comes from several places. One is the study of coupled Josephson junctions. So the quantum version of the three rotor problem, or even in fact the n rotor problem, models chains of coupled Josephson junctions with rotor angles theta corresponding to the superconducting phase in metallic segments. Between two metallic segments is a tunnel junction, and associated with these Josephson tunneling junctions there is a Josephson coupling energy that is related to our cosine energy, and the kinetic energy that I told you about is related to the capacitive charging energy of the metallic segments. Moreover, since rotors correspond to phases at distinct sides of the chain, rotor angles can coincide without any collisional singularities. So this is why we have this peculiar situation where rotors can pass through each other. It is just like saying the phase of the first segment and the second segment happen to be the same. The three rotor problem or the n rotor problem also arises elsewhere. In particular, the quantum n rotor problem arises from a partial continuum limit of the two-dimensional XY model of classical statistical mechanics. Now, the latter describes planar spins on sides of an n cross m lattice of sides with nearest neighbor ferromagnetic interactions between the spins. So the dot product of spins will give you some cosine of difference in angles. Now the idea is to retain the lattice spacing in the horizontal direction, but let the lattice spacing go to 0 in the vertical direction, and then take a continuum limit in the vertical direction as well as a Wick rotation converting the vertical direction into time. When one does that, the action of the two-dimensional XY model in a suitable limit gives you the action of the quantum n-rotor model. Now, the XY model displays the famous Kosterlitz-Thouless topological phase transition, which is associated to an unbinding of certain vortex-anti-vortex pairs. These vortices have to do with how the spins are arranged as the temperature increases beyond a certain transition temperature, at which the correlation functions are expected to transition from power law to exponential decay as the temperature increases beyond TKT. So field theoretically, this may be regarded as a transition from a massless or ungapped phase to a massive or gapped phase. And our original motivation to study this model had to do with understanding some properties of this mass gap. However, the problem took a life of its own. And what I will describe to you is the new avataram of this problem. So and it's going to be the classical version, at least in this talk. So in this new avataram, the classical three-rotor problem will be viewed as a simpler variant of the gravitational three-body problem. As I said, the configuration space is a 3 torus, and that is compact, and the potential is bounded. So unlike the Newtonian 1/r potential, here the potential is bounded. So and the configuration space is compact, so particles cannot escape to infinity, nor can the dynamics produce singularities. So in this sense, it is simpler than the celestial mechanical three-body problem, which is a topic we had been studying previously. Now, the problem of two rotors turns out to reduce to a simple pendulum, while a continuum limit, when you have the number of rotors going to infinity, is described by the Sine-Gordon field. So these things are already known in the literature. Our contribution is to look at the region between these extremes. So between these extremes, we find that the three-rotor problem has rich dynamics and provides a non-trivial arena to study quasi-periodic solutions, instabilities, chaos, and ergodic behavior. So let me tell you about this story. To set things up, it is convenient to define a center of mass angle phi naught, which is the average of the three rotor angles, as well as relative angles phi 1 and phi 2, which are given by the difference between neighboring rotor angles. Now the relative angles phi 1 and phi 2 evolve independently of phi naught on a 2 torus S1 cross S1, and these are the equations of motion. Phi 1 double dot is some very nonlinear function of phi 1 and phi 2, and so also for phi 2. There's a 1-2 symmetry in the problem. So here we have a contour plot of the potential V, and here is phi 1 and phi 2, and the opposite edges are identified since this is a 2 torus. I'll come back to that. Now the relative energy E of the rotors in units of the coupling constant G is the only known conserved quantity and is a dimensionless control parameter. So in these variables, the energy involves a phi 1 dot squared, a phi 2 dot squared, a cross term phi 1 phi 2 dot, as well as some cosine of the relative angles. So remember, having eliminated the center of mass variable, we have 2 degrees of freedom, a 4-dimensional phase space, and 1 conserved quantity. Now, the ground state of this system, G, is the static solution at the global minimum of the potential energy over here, and it has energy 0 and corresponds to 3 coincident rotors. That is theta 1, theta 2, theta 3 all equal, so the difference in angles are both 0. And that can be viewed as the ferromagnetic ground state, where all spins are pointing in the same direction. Now there are 2 other types of static solutions with energy 4g and 4.5g, which lie at saddle points and maxima of the potential. Now to get a orientation on the system, it is integrable at energy 0 as well as energy infinity. In particular, when the energy is much less than the coupling strength, we have small oscillations around this ground state, and 2 conserved normal mode energies for 2 degrees of freedom. So the system is integrable at low energies. On the other hand, when the energy is much larger than the coupling constant, rotors rotate almost uniformly as their angular momenta are nearly conserved, and we get another integrable system. We will see that interesting things happen in between these two limits. Remarkably, certain periodic orbits provide a window into these interesting phenomena. Now, speaking of periodic solutions, the most famous solutions of the three-body problem, gravitational three-body problem, are those of Euler and Lagrange. So let's just recall them, where 3 masses traverse Keplerian orbits, even though you have a three-body problem. Each of them traverses a Keplerian orbit. In Euler's solutions, the 3 masses remain collinear, like in this example or in this example, with constant ratios of separations. While in Lagrange's solutions, the 3 bodies always lie at vertices of an equilateral triangle. In all these cases, individual masses traverse Keplerian ellipses of the 2-body system. More recently, there have been other periodic solutions found for the 3 and n body problem. These are called choreographies. These are periodic solutions where n equal masses follow each other at regular intervals in time around a closed path. So this is a rather funny example of a choreography, some 15 body problem or so. And there are many other such solutions that have been discovered more recently. Now, we have found that there are analogues of the Euler-Lagrange solutions as well as choreographies in the 3-rotor problem. So let me come to that. In fact, we find families of periodic solutions that we call pendula and breathers at all energies and choreographies up to moderate energies in the 3-rotor system, classical 3-rotor system. In pendula, 2 rotors form a bound pair like a small molecule with 0 separation, and the equation is reduced to that of a pendulum even though there are 3 bodies. That's just like you have Keplerian ellipses in the gravitational 3-body problem of Lagrange and Euler solutions. Now there are 2 topologically distinct classes of pendulum solutions, those for energy less than 4G and those for energy more than 4G, which we call librational and rotational. So let me show you a picture of a librational solution. So here 2 masses have formed a molecule. This is the blue colored molecule, and the third one is the lighter one, the yellow one. And the 2 are oscillating about each other in time. This is a librational solution. We also have rotational ones where again you have a heavy molecule and a light third mass, but they can go all around the circle. So these are the 2 types of pendulum solutions in the 3-rotor system. They exist at all energies, either below 4G or above 4G. We also have other types of solutions called breathers, where one rotor is always midway between the other 2. So here's a movie of a breather where one rotor is in the middle and the other 2 sort of oscillate around it. And we also have choreographies where all 3 bodies are equally separated in time. Now interestingly, pendula display remarkable stability properties. So let me come to that. What we find is that pendula are, so we have a family of solutions parameterized by energy, these so-called pendulum solutions. For high energies, they are stable. At very low energies, again they are stable. But there is an interesting transition between the 2. So let me explain this using this plot. Horizontal axis is energy on a logarithmic scale, energy going to infinity to the right and going to 0 on the left, with energy 4 in the middle. I'm plotting here the stability index, which is related to the trace of a so-called monodromy matrix -2, which is a measure of the stability of these solutions. So when the stability index exceeds 2 or is less than -2, the solutions are unstable, whereas when they're between, they are stable. So let's look at this figure carefully. At very low energies, pendula are stable. Then all of a sudden, at a certain low energy, they hit an instability. Then again are stable for another range of energies. Then again become unstable, followed by a stable window, unstable, stable window, and so on. And this is periodic. It repeats. This is a log scale, so this is periodic. So on the regular energy scale, this would be a geometric accumulation. both from above and from below. As one approaches 4G, this family of solutions display a geometric accumulation of stability to instability transitions. Now, such things have been seen before. This geometric accumulation bears a resemblance to the Efimov effect, as well as to stability transitions in the two-dimensional anharmonic oscillator studied by Yoshida, as well as to the cascade of period doubling bifurcations in the logistic map. So let me just describe one of these. So in 1970, Efimov studied the quantum spectrum of three particles, for instance, three nucleons or three alpha particles, subject to attractive interactions in the limit where the S-wave scattering length is much larger than the interaction range. He found something remarkable. He found that the spectrum of such trimers forms a geometric sequence, quantum spectrum, geometric sequence accumulating at the zero energy threshold corresponding to arbitrarily weak two-body bound states. So even though the two-body bound state is arbitrarily weak, there are three-body bound states, and in that limit the S-wave scattering line diverges. So we can view the accumulation of these energy levels, Efimov trimers, via a geometric sequence as akin to the periodicity of transition energies on a log scale in our system. The divergence of the scattering length is analogous to the diverging time period in our system at energy 4, whereas there it was energy 0. So there are other systems also that display such geometric accumulations. Now coming back to our system, we will see that this cascade is associated with a rather sharp transition to chaos around 4G. But before describing the chaos, let me give you another viewpoint. It turns out that the onset of widespread chaos around 4G, which I'm going to tell you about, is also associated with the appearance of geodesic instabilities in a geometric formulation of our problem. What is this? It turns out that classical trajectories of the three-rotor problem, or for that matter any Hamiltonian mechanical system of certain sorts, can be viewed as reparameterized geodesics of a certain metric that goes back to work of Jacobi and Maupertuis, Jacobi-Maupertuis metric Gij on the energetically allowed portion of the configuration space. Here is the torus. So this metric it's actually a family of metrics parameterized by energy. It is conformal to the quadratic form metric associated with the kinetic energy Mij. So if you have a quadratic in velocities Lagrangian, you have associated quadratic form and you form a metric from that. This Jacobi-Maupertuis metric is conformal to that kinetic metric through a factor involving the potential energy. So one can study the curvature of this metric, in this case on the configuration torus, as a function of energy, and what we find remarkably is that when the energy is less than 4G, the curvature, scalar curvature of this Jm metric is strictly positive in the energetically allowed region, while for energy more than 4G, the curvature can take either sign, both positive as well as negative. So for energy less than 4G, the Jacobi-Maupertuis curvature is positive, indicating geodesic stability, whereas for E more than 4G, there is an onset of geodesic instabilities. So here is a plot of the curvature. It is positive everywhere, whereas it has both signs for higher energies. Now coming to chaos.
Is this the Riemann curvature?
Yes, it is. I mean, it's a scalar curvature. It's the scalar curvature. Ricci scalar. Yeah. Right. So yeah, in this case, the configuration space is two-dimensional. So the entire information in the Riemann tensor is contained in the Gaussian curvature. But you could do this for higher dimensional configuration spaces as well, in which case you have to consider the sectional curvatures in all two planes through any point, or the full Riemann tensor. So now what we are going to do is see that this geodesic instability is also associated to chaos, development of chaos in a more traditional sense, and this is revealed through the study of Poincare sections. So remember, in our relative dynamic system, we have a two-dimensional configuration space, four-dimensional phase space, one conserved quantity which is energy. So the dynamics on an energy hypersurface is confined to a three-dimensional hypersurface. Now on this three-dimensional hypersurface, we can put some variable equal to a constant like phi1 equal to 0 and look for all instants of time where a trajectory intersects a two-dimensional surface described by such a condition. So such a situation is called a Poincare surface, and here are plotted the intersections of various trajectories with a Poincare surface defined by phi1 equal to 0 at a certain energy. So this is a two-dimensional surface within the phase space, and we are looking at points at which a trajectory intersects it. So these continuous curves are actually a large collection of dots, stroboscopic dots recorded each time a trajectory crosses it. What we find is that for energy less than 4G, all these sections, I mean each of these is called a section, one color corresponds to one trajectory. All trajectories on the surface phi1 equal to 0 are nearly regular, that is concentrated on one-dimensional curves, and also display certain symmetries under phi2 to minus phi2, left-right symmetry as well as up-down symmetry. These are symmetries of the original Hamiltonian. Chaotic sections, and by that I mean trajectories on the Poincare surface that are not concentrated on one-dimensional curves but rather occupy entire two-dimensional regions. Those are what we call chaotic sections. First appear at roughly energy 4G, accompanied by a spontaneous breaking of some of these discrete symmetries. For instance, the color on the left and the right may not quite be matched. The orbits may not be symmetric once you reach energy approximately 4. So what we find is that the phi2 to minus phi2 symmetry is broken around 4G, but is restored at slightly higher energies, while the P2 to minus P2, namely up-down symmetry, remains broken up to high energies. Now this is understandable because at very high energies, particles either rotate clockwise or counterclockwise, so the reversal of momentum or angular momentum symmetry remains broken. So this is a progression of with energy. You see regularity at low energies, a return to regularity at high energies, and in between a transition to chaos. Now to quantify the transition to chaos, we have calculated what we call the fraction of chaos, defined as the fraction of the area of this Poincare surface occupied by chaotic sections, chaotic region. Here is a plot of this fraction of chaos. Up to energy 4, it is practically 0 to fairly high accuracy. And then it shoots up, energy approximately 4, it shoots up and reaches nearly 1 at energy 5.3 or so. So there's a sharp transition to chaos as well as a gradual return to regularity as the fraction of chaos drops back to 0 asymptotically with high energies. Unexpectedly, we also find a band of global chaos, namely where the fraction of chaos is nearly 1, as is displayed in this inset. It is saturating at 1. And by that, that's displayed in these Poincare surfaces. We see that the entire Poincare section surface is covered by chaotic trajectories, except of course for isolated periodic orbits like pendula or isosceles solutions. And the last elliptic islands to cease to exist are around choreographies, and the first elliptic islands to open up are around pendula. So this is the overall picture with changing energy. Yeah. Now, so this led us to study ergodicity in our system. So there are several model systems that display ergodic behavior. For instance, geodesic flow on constant negative curvature compact Riemann surfaces, Sinai billiards, as well as certain Lorentz gases and kicked rotors. Interestingly, in the three-rotor problem, yes.
One question.
Yes.
When you talk about chaos, do you measure the Lyapunov exponents, or how do you
Sure.
measure it by the area of this?
Both. We have done both. We can measure the largest Lyapunov exponent that it's being positive. Yes, we have. We've done it both ways. Yes, and that is very interesting as well. Yeah, as well as in connection to quantum theory. So now I'm switching gears a little bit. I'll tell you a few things about ergodicity in our system. I have, I think, only 5 minutes left. So you tell me when I'm done with time, and I will stop at that point. So 7 minutes, great. So interestingly, in the three-rotor problem, we find ergodic behavior on the 5152 torus in the band of global chaos. That is energies in a certain window, 5.3T to 5.6. So in what follows, we will provide evidence for ergodicity with respect to the Liouville measure by showing that time and ensemble averages agree. And in view of our geometric interpretation, this system would then furnish an example of ergodic geodesic flow on a Riemann surface, here a torus with non-constant curvature. I mean, Sinai has studied ergodicity on geodesic flow on compact Riemann surfaces with constant curvature, negative curvature. So this has got non-constant curvature of both signs. Yeah. Other systems like kick rotors or Lorentz gases involve boundaries, reflection at boundaries, defocusing boundaries. In our system, there are no boundaries. So it's and it's continuous time, whereas kick rotors have discrete time evolution or kicks. So when we say the equality of ensemble and time averages, what we mean is that we compute time averages, that is, we plot a histogram of the values of some observable, like the relative angle phi1, at equally spaced points along a trajectory. We take a chaotic trajectory and plot a histogram of values of phi1 along it. You get a certain histogram. In this case, it turns out to be uniformly distributed in the band of global. So let me just step back a bit. So we compute also ensemble averages. So an ensemble average is defined. So the ensemble average of a observable f is a distribution function rho e of f on the energy hypersurface E is given by a phase space average of delta function of energy conservation as well as the value of that observable being equal to f. So this gives a ensemble average distribution function. And what we find is that at low and high energies, the time and ensemble averages do not agree. There are significant departures, whereas in the band of global chaos, the two agree to high accuracy, less than, the agreement is better than 0.2%. Yeah, and we also have looked at the approach to ergodicity in time. What we find is that the time average approaches the ensemble average in a power law fashion, 1 by root t. If you do a time average over a length of time capital T, then the RMS deviation from the ensemble average falls off as 1 by root t. This can be explained using decay of correlations and chaos. And you can also see that the difference between time and ensemble averages is large when you go to high energies or low energies, whereas in the band of global chaos, they agree quite well. There are other aspects of this problem that we have looked at. One of them is mixing. So roughly, if a collection of trajectories starting from a small volume in phase space in an energy hypersurface approach at late times a uniform distribution on the energy hypersurface, then we say the flow is mixing. So let's look at what happens in our system. We start with about 100,000 initial conditions in a small box in energy hypersurface and let them evolve. We follow each of the trajectories. Of course, the energy hypersurface is compact. That is why these boundaries are there. And as time evolves, we find that all these trajectories, they get almost uniformly distributed with respect to the Liouville measure on the energy hypersurface. So suppose we partition the energy hypersurface into small cells labeled I with Liouville volumes mu I and consider a large number n of trajectories starting from a small region of the energy hypersurface. That's what we just did. If the dynamics is mixing, then in the limit as n goes to infinity and t goes to infinity, the number of trajectories located at time t in a cell I must be basically proportional to the total number of trajectories and the fraction of volume that cell occupies, which is mu I divided by the volume of the hypersurface. So if we then rescale by that, the number of trajectories per this expected value should, that distribution should strongly peak around 1, and that's precisely what we find. This is the histogram of the scaled number of trajectories in each cell. At very early times, the trajectories have not explored much of the phase space, so most cells are empty. Whereas as time evolves, the distribution shifts to the right, and eventually at late times, like time 300, it becomes sharply peaked around 1. So this is strong evidence for strong mixing in the blend of global chaos. Okay, so tell me whether I have a couple of minutes. What is the situation?
Yeah, no, no.
Okay, great. So we've looked at one more aspect, which is to do with recurrence. Recurrence time statistics provide another window into Ergodistian mixing. So for a given trajectory, the recurrence time tau to a finite size cell in phase space of a given energy is the time from one exit of a trajectory to the next exit. So one can look at a large collection of trajectories starting from this cell and look at the distribution of their recurrence times, first recurrence time. Now, recurrence times in chaotic systems often exhibit certain universal features, such as that the first recurrence time has an exponential limit distribution, e to the minus tau, with a mean return time tau bar, and successive recurrence times are independently distributed. Now, we have examined this in our system, and in the band of global chaos, we find in the three-rotor system that the distribution of first recurrence times is well described by the exponential law, with a mean recurrence time. The exponential law holds for cells of various sizes. These are finite size cells. They don't have to be infinitesimal. They hold for finite size cells at any location in the phase space at a given energy. However, the mean recurrence time tau bar changes with the cell volume. And it's very interesting to look at how this mean recurrence time changes with cell volume. What we find is a scaling law. Interestingly, the mean recurrence time is related to the size of the cell. You might imagine if you have a big cell, you are likely to return more quickly. But if you have a small cell, you are likely to take longer to return. What we find is that the mean recurrence time tau bar is proportional to the minus 2/3 power of the volume of the cell. Yeah, so if you rescale by this size of the cell, then all of the data falls on a single line. That is the tau bar versus the cell volume on a log scale will lie on a straight line with slope minus 2/3. Now, this may be regarded as a continuous time analog of Katz's lemma, for which he had studied for maps, that is discrete time dynamical systems. The mean recurrence time being inversely proportional to the surface area. See, v to the 2/3 can be considered the surface area of a cell, because v to the 1/3 is roughly the linear dimension. And this is consistent with the expectations of other authors. If we interpret the attractor for the system as the whole energy hypersurface, because we have global chaos. If we had a smaller attractor, this thing could differ. Yeah. Now, let me just summarize and conclude. So I hope I have entertained you with a few figures and movies. We have viewed the three-rotor problem as a place to discover new phenomena and study aspects of chaos. The problem is somewhat simpler than the gravitational three-body problem due to the absence of collisional and non-collisional singularities, which are present in four-body problem and so on in gravitational physics. By contrast to the astronomical three-body problem, the quantum three-rotor problem is also of interest. It models chains of coupled Josephson junctions, and we are looking into that, the quantum aspects of this problem. We find analogs of Lagrange and Euler periodic solutions in choreographies, and discover a rather sharp transition to chaos around 4G energy with 4 remarkable features. A sharp rise in the chaotic portion of Poincare surfaces. I mean, this is a slight surprise, because often one believes that the transition to chaos is somewhat more gradual because of the KM expectations from KM theorem that tori gradually sort of dissolve invariant tori. We also see spontaneous symmetry breaking on Poincare surfaces associated to the development of chaos, an accumulation of stability transition in pendulum solutions, and a change in sign of the Jacobi-Maupertuis curvature. So this, we believe, is a very nice thing. I mean, people have talked about curvature as an indicator of chaos, but we believe that in this system there is a very, very clear connection, a smoking gun kind of connection between the change in sign of the JM curvature and the onset of chaos. Now, just above the transition to chaos, we have found a band of global chaos where we have provided evidence to our ergodicity and mixing. And the Liouville measure ensemble average distribution functions of relative angles and angular momenta are found to agree with the corresponding distributions along chaotic trajectories, indicating ergodic behavior. In fact, one thing I didn't speak about is that the ensemble average distribution functions of momenta show interesting phase transitions with energy from the Wigner semicircular distribution at low energies to bimodal at high energies. This is something we don't understand very much yet. We've also talked about mixing, and also that recurrence times follow a beautiful scaling law. Brief discussion. So by contrast with billiards and kicked rotors, the three-rotor system furnishes an example of ergodicity, hopefully, in a continuous time autonomous Hamiltonian system without boundaries or specular reflections. In the three-rotor system, we find a close connection between the transition to chaos and the onset of geodesic instabilities. It could provide an example of ergodicity in geodesic flow on a torus of non-constant curvature. Unlike in Yoshida's anharmonic oscillator, we conjecture that there are no non-trivial energy hypersurfaces in phase space on which all trajectories are periodic or quasi-periodic. So that is, there are no integrable energies in between. It's integrable to low, 0 and infinity, and in between nowhere is it integral. This is our conjecture. We would of course like to understand the physical mechanisms underlying the onset of chaos in this system, and also quantum manifestations as well as extensions to 4 or more rotors. So I will stop here. These are some references. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Govind. Questions? Prashant had a question, but I suppose he has answered it. Prashant, you want to ask your question?
So I had a question.
Bala, please.
You used 3 words: mixing, ergodicity, and chaos. Which one is? I mean, mixing implies ergodicity, or suppose, or is it the other way around?
Yeah, chaos would imply both of them. Yeah, ergodicity is the weakest. Mixing is slightly stronger, and then yeah, I hope I got that right. Yeah, and chaos is.
Ergodicity is, no, when we assume that, say, a normal thermal distribution, so-called microcanonical
Yeah.
ensemble, that is just
Ergodicity.
ergodic.
Yeah, that is ergodic. Yeah, need not be mixing. Yeah.
But when you
Yeah.
talk about the Liouville, you think of a Liouville fluid in phase space, you assume the number of points is proportional to the volumes, right, in phase space. It means a uniform density.
Correct.
So that's mixing. It's not ergodic.
Okay, maybe I got something wrong. No, the sense in which I mentioned Liouville is that, see, to define ergodicity, you need a measure. That is, with respect to what measure you are going to say that something is ergodic. So it was in that constant. So, and in our case, we have used the Liouville volume element. No, perhaps I didn't quite catch your question.
Usually, when you assume an ensemble, you assume that the number of points is proportional to the volume of phase space.
Correct.
The volume element. So that assumes a uniform distribution of points. That's from what you said, that sounds like mixing. It's not just ergodicity.
Yeah. Okay. I have.
Equilibrium, right? Sorry, an equilibrium. Yeah.
Uh, Sure. Yeah.
So I'm assuming, some thermalized distribution. You assume that the number of points is proportional to the volume of phase space. So that's what you would call mixing.
Yes. Well, okay. One has to be careful with these definitions. Let us. I can say slightly more clearly what mixing is. So suppose you have 2 subsets of an energy hypersurface A and B, and you call A and B, and then you start with the trajectories. You take B and evolve it forward in time, and at late times you ask to what extent B overlaps with A, and the measure of that intersection, if it is given by the size of B and the fractional of size of A, then you call it mixing. So wait a minute. Is Himalaya in this Google Meet? Yeah. Can you remind me which one is bigger? Chaos is the strongest, or at least global chaos.
Chaos in compact surfaces is strongest because, if things are not bounded, things are crazy.
Yeah. Well, let's suppose that compact energy hypersurface. Yeah.
In nicer systems, yes, chaos implies mixing.
Yeah. So that is the order. Yeah, so ergodicity is equality of averages, time and ensemble averages. Yeah, Mixing.
So when you talk about microcanonical ensemble, which one do you mean? Do you mean just ergodicity or do you mean mixing?
We don't mean either of them. When we say when we say statistical mechanics, hypothesis of Boltzmann, we have the assumption of ergodicity in mind. It is a matter of calculating averages. We are not specifically talking about mixing, as far as I understand. Boltzmann is only requesting that time averages may be replaced with ensemble averages, which are in principle easier to compute. Mixing is a stronger condition which mathematicians have introduced and can be used to establish ergodicity when needed.
Okay.
Yeah.
It just happens that many statistical systems end up being mixing.
Yes. So
Ah.
yeah. So we are somewhat cavalier about it.
I have a couple of questions. May I?
Yes, please.
Yeah. One question is since at E equal to 4G, you have this transition, right?
Yes.
There are two things one can think of. One is that is there analog of critical phenomena here?
Yes.
Define critical exponents.
In a
As the fraction of chaos function vanishes as you approach E from 4G above,
yes.
does it vanish in some exponent? And is there any universality with respect to initial conditions that you may choose?
Yeah, I believe there is universality with respect to initial conditions. We do have indications of that. For instance, there is even this rate at which this thing is going away from zero. I hope you can see the inset, the fraction of chaos. So there are various universal phenomena. I mean, independent of the choice of surface, independent of choice of initial condition, there are those things. There are other things as well. I mentioned that there are a sequence of transitions where you go from regularity to stability to instability. Now, at each of these transitions, it is itself some kind of transition, and one can study behavior near each of these transitions and define certain exponents. So yeah, there are ideas of along those lines. For instance, Feigenbaum himself also studied this kind of thing in the logistic map. He had discovered certain universal phenomena. In the logistic map, there is a sequence of bifurcations and in the logistic map, and the sequence of bifurcations of successive bifurcation values approaches a limit called the first Feigenbaum constant. So there is yeah, and in our system also we believe there are similar things at these bifurcations.
Yeah, and second question is more sort of suggestion. Have you tried consider coupling this system to thermal noise? For example, introduce noise at some temperature, 2-point function, and such that it fluctuates the energy.
Sure. Yeah.
And as we approach the 4G, we should see the typical thermodynamic phase transition type of thing. I mean, maybe we thought of that.
Okay, we have not investigated this. This is a nice suggestion. So,
Let me link the chaos and other features which are being seen as transitions, which are dynamical transitions.
Okay.
Thermodynamics, how it impacts thermodynamical transitions.
Okay. All right.
Because thermodynamics is providing, temperature is providing basically noise.
Yes.
Might be coupled to the dynamical system in some form. I don't know exactly. Such that the energy exchanges are fluctuating about a particular value.
Okay.
Which you choose. And then study how the some macroscopic or whatever, some equilibrium properties change as you change this parameter.
Okay.
Perhaps you may consider that curiosity.
Sure. Yeah, this sounds like an interesting thing. We haven't looked at it, but yes, certainly. Yeah, I would like to speak to you more about that because I am running into Vishnu's time.
Okay.
I'm sorry.
Yeah, okay, let's move on then. There is a discussion session, I hope this will be available. Yeah, so let's thank Govind again.
Thank you.
Vishnu? Yeah.
Yes, I am.